Friends, I will talk to you now about the purchase management. See, the purchase management, the sales management, the inventory management, the contracts management, etc. They are all the branches of the same tree. They have so much of commonality. But still, they are not one and the same. They have maintained their separate identities. We will now focus on the purchase management, and we will also cite reference to the other managements whenever it is required. See, purchase means procuring of materials, the consumables, the capital items, the plant and machinery, and also the services that are needed in an unit for the consumption or production or maintenance. So, the duties of a purchase department in an organization, in other words, the purchase management, is to purchase the right material by going to the reputed dealer in right time, in right quantity, in a most economical way by following the approved tendering procedures of the organization, to deliver it to the right person, then to maintain proper books of account, to arrange for prompt payments, to prepare the purchase budget, to inspect the quantity and quality before accepting the goods. So, in other words, the objectives of the purchase management we can summarize and put it like this: it is to facilitate a smooth production and sales, to avoid surprise change in demand, to avoid the bulk discounting wherever necessary, to lower the ordering costs, to have the stock available when required, to use the available space most economically, to meet the high percentage of demand without creating the excess stock level, to keep the expenditure within the budget authorization. Also, it is the objective of the purchase management to decide which items to stock and which to procure on demand, to avoid the stockouts and the shortage situations, to eliminate the duplication in ordering, to check against the losses through carelessness, and to locate and dispose the obsolete items of stores, to bring down the inventory carrying cost, and to facilitate the purchase economics. So the scope of purchase management does not end here, because more importantly, the organization should be prompt and quick in verifying, testing, and accepting the material and releasing the payments immediately to the suppliers. So this helps the suppliers and the service providers to come forward on a similar occasion next. So this increases their confidence level and also allow them to survive. So they are the backbones of our organization. See, due to organizational internal problems or complexities of the organizational systems and procedures, or due to the negligent attitude of the internal staff, the suppliers should not become the victims. Payments due to them should never be delayed. So that's the most important objective of the purchase management. Now let us understand the procedure that we follow or that we are supposed to follow for procurement. See, before procurement, an intent should be raised by the user or the user department in the prescribed forum, projecting his requirement. Intent is nothing but the written requisition for purchase in the approved forum. So, prior approval of the competent financial authority should be taken for the estimates and the item. And if it is a proprietary article item, then a proprietary certificate is to be obtained from the competent authority and enclosed. If there is a need auspect committee, you will have to take the clearance of the need auspect committee before submitting your indent. Proper justification should be given by the user for procurement of that item or services. Financial concurrence should be obtained from the finance department at appropriate level about the budget provision, budget reference numbers, etc. So then, with this, if it is submitted to the purchase department, they will go for calling of quotations. So, calling of quotations by following the prescribed tendering procedure of the organization. Then a comparative statement is prepared. Purchase committee recommendations are taken. Then it is submitted to the competent financial authority for the approval of the specific amount, then placement of order, signing of contract or agreement or whatever it is. And it is a guideline of the CBC that we should not negotiate with the vendors. So you had to straight away place the orders on L1. But supposing for any justifiable reason you negotiate with the lowest, the L1, you should also provide opportunity to all. And you have to, record the reasons for either negotiating with L1 or for rejecting the L1, supposing L1 is rejected. And there are different methods of purchasing or different methods of tendering. They are usually the global tendering, public tendering, limited tendering, oral inquiry and obtaining of the quotations, the emergent purchases and spot quotations, etc. So in the case of public tender, you go for leading newspapers, you give your advertisement in newspapers having the national circulation. And if it is global, again, the same advertisement copy is also given, is made available to the embassies, to our embassies abroad, then they can also participate. And if it is limited tendering, you will have a list of approved vendors for different categories. So you will have to send the codes for more than five such people dealing with the category of the article or services that you require now. And again, it can be oral inquiry and obtaining of quotations or emergent purchases and getting spot quotations if it is an emergent requirement and the reason is to be justified and the amounts also should be small in such cases. And after following the tendering procedure, you can also sign the rate contract. There are different purchasings like rate contract purchasing, running contract purchasing, central purchase, and purchasing strictly by the requirement, purchasing for a specified period, marketing purchasing, and so on. In the case of rate contract purchasing, you get the quotations from all the qualified vendors and you will also decide about the rates for different items, general use items. And you need not have to purchase it immediately, and the rate contract should be valid for a period of 1 year or 2 years, depending on the requirement. So, as and when you require these general use items at rates agreed upon, you can go on procuring them. And in this case, the advantage is the effects of fluctuations are not felt, the clerical work is reduced, and it also avoids the inventory holding cost. On the other hand, in the case of running contract, the procedure is same, like rate contract. But here you have to also indicate in your inquiry what is the roughly the you have to estimate your requirement for this contract period, and you have to also provide business to the extent of 70 to 75% of your estimates. Then coming to central purchase, it is mass purchase, that is volume purchase. So in these cases, the bargaining is possible. Material can be obtained from the manufacturer himself because of the bulk quantity and the overall position of the stores available in one place, and the strict control is also possible. On the other hand, it can be purchasing strictly by requirement as and when it is required. And the disadvantage is it is difficult to meet the sudden demand if there is any. And it can be purchased for a specified period like 1 quarter, 6 months, year, etc., etc. Or it can be marketing purchasing. So in the case of marketing purchasing, the purchasing is done after analyzing the market trends, and less space is required for storage in this case, but lower rate advantage also is available because as and when required, you go to market, study the market position and purchase it. And there is also another mode of procuring, that is by repeat order, placing a repeat order. Supposing within 6 months after placement of a particular order, there is a need to procure a similar item within 6 months, and the quantity does not exceed the original value, original quantity, and if there is no downward trend, then you can definitely place a repeat order on them and procure it. Only thing is there should be no downward trend in the market, and it should not be done purposefully. Okay. And there are different types of contracts also, like fixed price contract, cost plus contract, rate contract, contract with the provision for escalation, and so on. Now let us come to the purchase order. See, the purchase order, the letter of intent, or the MOU, an agreement, contract. So these are all the contracts only. Even a oral agreement is also a contract. But the difference between the purchase order and the contract is that the contract, what we say, it is signed on a stamp paper of requisite value with witnesses, etc. And if there is any breach, it can be questioned tomorrow in a court of law. Whereas the other modes like purchase order, agreement, MOU, etc., although they are also the contracts, it cannot be questioned in a court of law. If there is a breach, you can only blacklist a supplier. So now let us see what the purchase order should indicate. You have to very clearly indicate the make, the specification, the brand, the quantity. Similarly, the performance parameters, the price, taxes, the payment schedule, delivery schedule, liquidated damages clause, the warranty clause, bank guarantee provision for advance payments if required, then the head of account with the expenditure pertains, etc., etc., is to be, the mandatorily indicated in the purchase order. And even whether the rate is net or gross, you have to indicate if it is including taxes like GST, excise duty, customs duty, and so on. You will have to again quantify what is the tax, what is the rate, and what is the value without taxes. And if any advance payments are involved, again you have to insist on bank guarantee. And advance payment, again, there are certain limits. It can only be 30 or 40% of the total value, depending on your departmental guidelines. And it should be always against a bank guarantee. And you should always retain 10% for the performance warranty wherever performance, guaranteed performance is required. And also towards the warranty of the items. And in the purchase order, how much is towards the material? Supposing the purchase order cost includes the cost of the material, labor, brought out material, handling charges, etc. You will have to provide a detailed breakup on the cost of material, labor, brought out items, brought out material, handling charges, etc. separately. And if we supply the material, organization should never get into the business of supplying the material required for the fabrication or manufacturing of our material as far as possible. But supposing it becomes inevitable, then the material account should be insisted from the supplier. Now let us see what are the general conditions, the general principles to be observed when entering into a contract from the organizational fund, especially in government where the public money is involved. See here, the terms of the contract should be precise and definite, number one. As far as possible, the legal and financial advice should be taken before placement of an order. These standard forms of contract should only be utilized. Terms of contract should not be materially varied, and there should be no uncertain or indefinite liability in the contract. And wherever practical and advantageous, the contract should be placed only after invitation of the open tenders. that is public tender. And in selecting the tender, in addition to other things, the financial status of the firms must also be taken into account. Orders should not be placed without at least a written agreement about the price, and provision should be made for safeguarding the organizational property entrusted to the contractor. And when the contract is likely to continue for a long period, there should be a provision for the cancellation or the revocation of the contract within 6 months notice, wherever the contracts are likely to, go for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, like that. And no work should be commenced without proper execution of the agreement. The contract document should be executed as far as possible within 21 days of the issue of a letter of acceptance. The cost plus contract should be ordinarily avoided. Price variation clause, it can be provided only in the long-term contracts, generally exceeding going beyond 18 months. The price variation clause should also specify the cutoff dates for the material and labor, beyond which the variation clause can be incorporated. And the clause should also stipulate a minimum percentage of variation of the contract price, above which only the variation should be admissible. And similarly, where advance or stage payments are made, no price variations will be admissible after the dates of such payments. No price variation will be admissible beyond the original scheduled delivery date for the default on the part of the supplier. But supposing it is an account of the default of the purchaser himself, then the dates, etc., are to be amended, the contract is to be amended, and then only you can provide the price variation clause. And where contracts are for the supply of equipment, goods, etc., etc., cost of the equipment, cost of the taxes, etc., should be provided separately. Lump sum contract should be avoided. And as I said, wherever the organizational materials are involved, then a schedule of quantities with the issue rates of such materials should also be a part of the contract. And all contracts should have invariably should have a provision for the recovery of the liquidated damages, and a warranty clause should be incorporated in every contract requiring the supplier to repair the item within the warranty period. And organization should have the right to reject the goods which are not according to the specifications put in the purchase order or the contract. And the proper procedure should also be laid down for the custody and monitoring of the bank guarantees, about which a mention is made in the contract. And in the organizations, different registers are maintained, have to be maintained, especially in the stores. The daily receipt register, the issue register, surplus stock register, the suspense register, the condemned article register, loan register, similarly the empty containers register, etc., etc. So the general causes for the failures of the equipment, whatever we procure, especially the high value equipment, high value plant and machinery. So they are supposed to work for the organization for 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, etc. But very frequently they go wrong. So they fail to work. The reasons are, generally the excessive vibration, worn out bearings, improper loads, high temperature, insulation failures, uneven expansion of the materials, absence of cooling systems, so on and so forth. And therefore, this calls for signing off the maintenance contracts. And if your maintenance cost is to be less, it is necessary that you should have well-trained operators, good lubrication system, periodical preventive maintenance, proper maintenance of the records, and so on. There are mainly three categories of annual maintenance contracts: the breakdown, preventive, and comprehensive maintenance contract. In the case of breakdown maintenance contract, the contractor will come and saturate the item when there is a breakdown and when you report it to him. Here, it involves more downtime. Your machines are out for a longer period. And the contract cost is only to set right the equipment. Otherwise, if there is any spares that he has to use, replace the items, you will have to pay separately. And the preventive contract again, periodical review. So every month, every quarter, they will come whether there is a breakdown or not. They will see the correctness of the equipment and you will have to pay them only for, the service charges. Whereas in the case of comprehensive maintenance, in the case of comprehensive maintenance contracts, the contract value is for both the services and also for the spares or the items that he has to use if there is any breakdown or if there is any damage. So in the first and second contracts, you contract only for the service charges. In the last one, it is for both services and the space that he may have to replace if it goes wrong. And many a times it is better or economical to go for lease instead of outright purchase, especially when we require high value machines for short periods. So it is better to sign the lease contracts, and there are different lease the types of lease like uniform lease, rental lease, the seasonally varying lease, the stepped up lease, deferred lease, etc., etc. Friends, stores actually means the unworked material in any form. So that is referred to as stores. And coming to inventory, inventory includes the raw material, the work in progress, the space, even the finished goods if you are a manufacturing and a selling organization. Otherwise, it becomes an asset if you are not a selling organization. And again, the scrap, etc. All these constitute inventory, and inventory is nothing but the current asset. And coming to the inventory management, the inventory also is to be properly managed. So to plan spacing, to prevent any leakage and wastage. Similarly, to issue the material only against the written request, to check the balances from time to time, to keep the record of materials and the cards, to prevent the entry of unauthorized persons into the stores, to coordinate with the other departments, to intimate the purchasing cycle, or to know about the requirement of the stores. And there are different types of stock. Of course, this is important only in manufacturing environment. So the buffer stock, safety stock, reserve stock, etc., etc. So the buffer stock means what is required for our normal consumption. And the safety stock means if there is an increased lead time, that should also take care of that. And the reserve stock means for increased demand. Suddenly, if there is an increased demand, your stock should take care, and that is called the reserve stock. And in the case of imports and exports, so if it is an import, the payments are made through letters of credit or by way of site draft or by way of demand draft. So LC, the letter of credit, the site draft, and payment by DD. These are the most usual or common payment modes. And an FE case or the import case differs from the indigenous procurement in a way that import, it definitely requires the approval of the higher authority, and most of the times you will have to go to the headquarters instead of taking approval from your departmental heads. And the documents that are required in the case of LC, where the payments are to be made against the documents, not against the receipt of item, you require an invoice, you require a airway bill, you require the conformance certificate, the certificate of origin, the packing list, etc., etc. So then you are confirmed that the items have been dispatched, and you can authorize the bankers, you can authorize your bankers to make the payment. So in brief, this is all about the purchase management, what I wanted to tell you. and the other things we will discuss in the other part. So thank you very much, friends.